Joon-seo had not slept in his own bedroom in 11 months. He built himself a fortress out of an office building on Figueroa Street, telling himself it was efficiency rather than avoidance. Then a storm stranded half his staff on a Thursday in November, and he watched his secretary, Simone Hale, handle the crisis with a quiet competence his sister Ye-jin had been naming for months, without either of them fully admitting why it mattered. That night, for the first time in 14 years, Joon-seo said out loud what his marriage had actually become: a merger with a wedding attached, arranged by his father to secure 3 shipping lanes. Simone told him the truth in return, that carrying something that heavy alone was its own kind of unhappiness. Neither of them named what had shifted between them. But it had shifted. And across town, in a house Joon-seo hadn't slept in for nearly a year, Yoon-seo-ra was about to notice exactly how much had changed, whether either of them said a word about it or not. Welcome back. If this is your first time here, Part 1 is everything you need. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. Now let's get into Part 2. The roads were still slick the next morning when Joon-seo's driver finally got him across town. Not home, but to the meeting with a shipping partner from Busan that the storm had forced off the calendar entirely the night before, rescheduled for 8 a.m. sharp because the man was flying out again by noon. Joon-seo had gone straight from the office to that meeting in the same suit he'd worn through the storm, and straight back to the office once it ended, the same as every morning for the past 11 months minus 1. The weeks after the storm did not announce themselves as a beginning. That was, Joon-seo would think later, precisely what made them dangerous. Nothing about them looked like the start of anything from the outside. He still arrived at 7. Simone still managed his calendar with the same unhurried precision. The office still ran exactly as it had for 2 years. What had changed was smaller than any single visible thing, and larger than all of them combined. He found himself, some mornings, arriving deliberately early simply because the first 20 minutes of the day, before the rest of the floor filled in, had become the 20 minutes he looked forward to most. The two of them, coffee, the specific unhurried quality of conversation that had nowhere urgent to be. He noticed himself noticing things about her he had filed away for 2 years without examining, the way she read a room before she spoke in it, the specific dry humor she deployed only when she'd decided someone had earned it, the fact that she remembered, without being reminded, the exact anniversary of his father's death each year, and simply cleared his calendar for it without ever once asking why. "You did that again," he said, the week the anniversary passed, finding his afternoon unexpectedly empty. "You've done it every year since you started." "I noticed the pattern your first year," Simone said. "You get quiet for exactly 1 day, and then you're fine. I decided the day should have some room in it, whether or not you ever asked me for that." "Nobody else has noticed that pattern in 14 years, he said. "Then nobody else was paying the right kind of attention," Simone said, and returned to her desk before the moment could become larger than either of them had agreed to let it be. He found himself, in the weeks that followed, cataloging small things about her that had nothing to do with her job performance and everything to do with the specific person she was underneath it. The way she took her coffee black except on the mornings after a difficult call with her mother, when she added cream, without explaining why, and he'd learned, eventually, not to ask. The particular economy of her handwriting on the margins of documents she reviewed, notes to herself rather than to him, precise and unadorned. The fact that she kept a small framed photograph on her desk of an older woman he'd never asked about, until one afternoon she volunteered, unprompted, that it was her grandmother, the one who'd raised her on the specific conviction that dignity wasn't something other people granted you, it was something you simply decided to carry, regardless of what anyone else granted or withheld. "She sounds like she'd have opinions about all of this," Joon-seo said, gesturing vaguely at the office, the glass, the specific weight of the empire he'd inherited, rather than built. "She'd have opinions about most of it," Simone agreed. "She wasn't impressed by money. She was impressed by whether you did right by the people who had less of it than you did. I think about that a lot, working here." "Do I do right by them?" Joon-seo asked, and he was surprised, hearing himself ask it, that the question had weight he hadn't expected it to carry. "Mostly," Simone said. You pay fairly. You don't perform generosity for an audience the way some executives do. But you've also spent 11 months treating this building like a place to hide, instead of a place to actually live your life, and I don't think my grandmother would have called that doing right by yourself, even if it didn't hurt anyone else directly. He said nothing to that for a long moment, understanding that she had, without raising her voice, or softening the observation, told him something true that nobody else in his life had been willing to say directly in over a decade. Ye-jin noticed the shift within a month, the specific unerring radar of a woman who had spent her entire life reading rooms for signs of the thing nobody was saying out loud. "You're different," she said, during one of her regular visits, watching her brother through the glass as Simone fielded a call in the outer office. "Lighter? I don't think I've seen you lighter in years." "I don't know what you mean," Joon-seo said, though something in his tone suggested he knew precisely what she meant, and was simply not ready to name it. "I think you do," Ye-jin said. "I've been telling you for months that she's exactly who she appears to be. I didn't expect you to actually start believing me." "Nothing has happened," he said. "I want to be precise about that. Nothing has happened between us." "I didn't ask if anything happened," Ye-jin said. "I asked if you're different. Those are separate questions, and you just answered the one I didn't ask, which tells me considerably more than if you'd answered honestly." "Still here? Good. Because what Se-ra notices next is not the thing either of them expected her to notice first. Subscribe and hit the bell. Let's keep going. Yoon-seo had spent 14 years cultivating a specific kind of vigilance, not toward her husband's feelings, which she had long since stopped tracking, but toward the household's reputation, the particular currency that mattered more to her than anything resembling warmth. She employed a housekeeper who reported, in the specific careful language household staff used when discussing matters above their pay grade, that Mr. Han's driver had mentioned, in passing, that his employer's mood had noticeably improved over the past several weeks. Summer did not care about her husband's mood. She cared about what an improved mood implied. She had never loved Joon-seo, and she had stopped pretending, even to herself, that the absence of love was a temporary condition sometime around their 5th year of marriage. What she had not expected, in 14 years of careful mutual avoidance, was the specific unease of discovering that her husband might have found something real with someone else, while she remained, by her own choice as much as his, entirely without anything resembling it herself. It was not jealousy exactly. She examined the feeling carefully, the way she examined most things, and concluded it was closer to a kind of unwelcome mirror, the sudden visibility of exactly how much of her own life she had also spent in careful, deliberate avoidance of anything that might have required her to be vulnerable. She had her own sources beyond the household, a network cultivated over 14 years of managing her side of a marriage that had never required affection, only management. A friend whose husband did business with Han Holdings mentioned, at a dinner Se-ra attended alone, as she attended most things now, that Joon-seo's secretary had become considerably more visible in his professional life than a secretary typically was. Present at meetings that didn't strictly require her, mentioned by name in contexts where an executive assistant's name rarely came up. Se-ra filed the information the way she filed everything that might eventually become useful, without immediate reaction, simply as a fact worth having in reserve. She raised it directly 3 weeks later, over the kind of dinner the two of them still occasionally staged for appearances, at a restaurant chosen specifically because it photographed well for the society pages that occasionally covered events their families still attended jointly. "I understand your secretary has become quite important to you," Seluksha said, without preamble, the specific flat delivery she reserved for observations she'd already decided were true. "She runs my professional life efficiently," Joon-seo said. "That's the job." "That's not what I asked," Se-ra said. "I asked whether she's become important. There's a difference, and I think you know it." Joon-seo was quiet for a moment, understanding that whatever he said next would either confirm or deny something he had not yet fully admitted to himself, let alone to the woman across the table whose opinion of his answer mattered less to him than his own honesty did. "I don't know what she's become," he said finally. "I know I trust her more than I trust almost anyone else in my life. I know that trust has grown without my deciding to grow it. I have not acted on anything beyond that, and I don't intend to discuss my marriage with you as though it's a functioning one, when we both know it stopped functioning years before Simone Hale ever worked for me." Sayra's expression did not change, but something in her posture shifted, the specific recalibration of a woman recalculating a husband she had believed, incorrectly, she fully understood. "That's more honesty than you've offered me in years," she said. "You asked a direct question," Joon-seo said. "I've decided I'm tired of managing around direct questions. We are right in the middle of something that could unravel 14 years of careful arrangement in a single conversation. Subscribe and stay close. You do not want to miss where this goes. Let's keep going." Sayra did not raise the subject again for several weeks, and Joon-seo understood, from the specific quality of her silence, that she was not letting it go. She was deciding what to do with it. What she decided arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered through the same channel most significant things in the marriage arrived through. A lawyer's letter, formal, precise, informing Joon-seo that his wife intended to file for divorce, citing the marriage's long-standing dissolution as grounds, and requesting an initial meeting to discuss terms. He read it twice at his desk, understanding, with a clarity that surprised him, that he felt something closer to relief than grief. He called Ye-jin first. "She's filing," he said, without preamble. 14 years, and it's ending with a letter from a lawyer neither of us has ever met socially. "How do you feel?" Ye-jin said. He considered the question honestly, the way Simone had once taught him, without either of them naming the lesson directly. That honesty cost less than the specific exhaustion of managing around a difficult truth. "Relieved," he said. "And afraid of what that relief means about the last 14 years, if I'm honest about that too." "It means you've been unhappy longer than you let yourself admit," Ye-jin said. "That's not a scandal, Joon-seo. That's simply the truth arriving later than it should have." The complication, when it arrived, came not from Sayra directly, but from her father. Yoon Tae-sik had built his own shipping concern across 4 decades running parallel to Han Sang-chul's, the two families' rivalry resolved, 14 years earlier, through exactly the marriage now dissolving. He requested a meeting with Joon-seo directly, arriving at Han Holdings' offices with the specific formal gravity of a man who understood that a divorce between their families was not simply a personal matter. "You understand what this threatens," Tae-sik said, once the pleasantries had been dispensed with. 3 shipping lanes, negotiated through this marriage 14 years ago. My daughter's departure from your household does not merely end a marriage. It reopens questions both our families spent considerable effort closing. I understand the business implications, Joon-seo said. I am not going to stay married to your daughter to preserve a shipping arrangement neither of us has cared about in years, Mr. Yoon. I would think you'd prefer an honest dissolution to 14 more years of the specific coldness both our households have been living inside. Honesty is a luxury for men who don't have 3 shipping lanes riding on the outcome, Tae-sik said, an echo, Joon-seo recognized immediately, of the exact sentence his own father had used to justify the marriage in the first place. My father said something nearly identical to me, the day he told me I was marrying your daughter, Joon-seo said. I was 26, and I didn't yet have the standing to tell him he was wrong. I have that standing now. I would rather renegotiate the shipping terms directly, on their own merits, than use a marriage neither of us wanted as collateral, for an arrangement that should have been able to stand on its own value from the beginning. Tae-sik studied him for a long moment, something shifting behind his composed expression. That's either extraordinarily naive, he said, or the first genuinely confident thing a Han has said to me in 14 years. I'd like it to be the second, Joon-seo said. Understand something, Tae-sik continued, standing to leave. I am not opposed to renegotiating the lanes on their own merits. I have simply never had reason to test whether they'd survive that renegotiation, because the marriage made testing unnecessary. You are proposing we find out, at considerable risk to both our company's quarterly positions, whether 4 decades of arrangement can hold without the personal alliance underneath it. I'm proposing we find out whether it should have needed the personal alliance in the first place, Joon-seo said. If the terms are fair, they'll hold on their own. If they only held because two people who never chose each other were forced to keep smiling at the same dinners, then I don't think either of our companies was ever as secure as we told ourselves it was. Tae-sik was quiet at the door for a moment, something almost like respect settling into the specific weathered lines of his face. Your father would not have said that, he said. No, Joon-seo agreed. He wouldn't have. I've spent considerable time recently deciding which parts of what he built are actually worth keeping, and which parts I only kept because I never stopped to ask. Watch what happens when the business threat and the personal one collide in the same week. Subscribe and hit the bell. The next part of tonight changes the shape of everything. Let's keep going. Joon-seo told Simone about the filing the same evening, finding her still at her desk, well past the hour she typically left, the specific quiet of an empty floor settling around them the way it had the night of the storm. Sira filed, he said. This morning. Her father came in this afternoon to remind me what the marriage was actually securing, in case I'd forgotten. Simone was quiet for a moment, something careful entering her expression. How do you feel about that? Relieved, he said, and I want to be honest with you about something else, because I think you've earned honesty more than anyone else in my life right now. He paused. I don't want you to think this changes anything between us immediately. I am not going to walk out of a 14-year marriage and directly into whatever this is between us, using you as the reason I finally left. That's not fair to you, and it's not the version of this I want, if there's going to be a version of this at all. Simone studied him for a long moment, the specific direct attention she brought to everything that actually mattered. I appreciate you saying that, she said, because I've been thinking about it too, and I'd landed in the same place without saying it out loud yet. Tell me, he said. I don't want to be the reason your marriage ended, Simone said. Not because I don't have feelings about what's been building between us. I do, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise to make this conversation easier. But I've watched women become the story of why a marriage failed, instead of simply existing alongside a marriage that was already failing on its own. I don't want that story attached to my name, and I don't think you want it attached to yours either. She held his gaze steadily. So here's what I'd propose, if you're willing to hear it. Nothing happens between us. Nothing, until your divorce is finalized. Not because I don't trust what this is, because I want whatever this becomes to start clean, without either of us ever having to wonder if it began as something borrowed from a marriage that hadn't technically ended yet. Joon-seo was quiet for a long moment, something in his chest settling at the specific clarity of what she'd just offered. Not distance, but a boundary drawn with the same careful precision she brought to everything else in his life. I can live with that, he said. I don't want to live with anything less than clean, either. Can I ask you something? Joon-seo said, and I want an honest answer, the way you've always given me one. Always, Simone said. Are you afraid this waiting costs us something? He said. That whatever this is might not survive months of careful distance, after finally admitting it exists at all. Simone considered the question with the same unhurried care she gave everything. A little, she admitted. I won't pretend otherwise. But I've watched enough relationships built on urgency collapse the moment the urgency ran out, and I'd rather risk losing something slow and deliberate than build something fast that turns out to have no foundation once the adrenaline of it wears off. If this is real, it will still be real in 6 months, or however long your divorce takes. If it isn't, I'd rather find that out now, waiting, than after I've already given up something I can't easily get back. That's a considerably more disciplined way of thinking about this than I've managed, Joon-seo said. I had a lot of practice, Simone said. Watching 2 of my closest friends give up careers for men who never once considered giving up anything of their own in return, I decided a long time ago I wasn't going to let urgency make my decisions for me, professional or otherwise. Then we wait, Simone said. However long it takes. I've built my entire life around doing things in the order that makes sense, rather than the order everyone else assumes is correct. This is no different. We are close to the point where waiting becomes its own kind of test. Subscribe and hit the bell. You will not want to miss how long either of them can actually hold to it. The divorce proceedings moved with the specific grinding slowness of an arrangement that involved not just 2 people, but 2 entire shipping empires. every term requiring renegotiation independent of the marriage that had originally bundled them together. Sarah's lawyers proved thorough, and Tae-sik's continued involvement made every session feel less like the end of a marriage and more like the early stage of a business divestiture that happened to include a marriage as one of its line items. Se-ra herself, Joon-seo noticed across the increasingly frequent meetings, seemed almost as relieved as he was, once the initial posturing settled into something closer to honest negotiation. "I don't hate you," she said, at the end of one particularly long session, the two of them alone for a moment, while their respective counsel conferred in a separate room. "I want you to know that, whatever this process makes it look like from the outside, I think we were simply never given the chance to be anything other than what our fathers decided we should be." "I don't hate you either," Joon-seo said. "I think you're right. I think we spent 14 years failing to build something neither of us was ever actually asked whether we wanted to build in the first place." "I used to resent you for that," Silvetta said, "for not fighting it harder, the way I always secretly hoped you would. I think, looking back, I was really resenting my own father, and you were simply the nearest available target." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm not asking you to absolve me of that. I only wanted to say it once, honestly, before this became purely a matter for lawyers." "I appreciate you saying it," Joon-seo said. "For what it's worth, I spent considerable time resenting my own father for the same reason, and you were the nearest available target for that resentment too. I don't think either of us was ever actually fighting each other. I think we were both fighting men who'd already made the decision and never bothered asking us." "Is there someone?" Se-ra asked, the question arriving without the sharpness he might have expected a year earlier. "I've heard things. I'd rather hear it from you than continue hearing it secondhand through my father's sources." Joon-seo considered his answer carefully. "There might be," he said. "Nothing has happened. I've made certain of that, and so has she. We're waiting until this is finished, because neither of us wanted to build something on top of something that hadn't properly ended yet." Se-ra was quiet for a long moment. "That's more integrity than I expected," she said, "from either of you." She stood, gathering her things. "I hope it's worth the waiting, Joon-seo. I think, whatever else is true about the last 14 years, we both deserve to find out what it feels like to choose something instead of simply inheriting it. That is where the real weight of part 2 settles. Whether the waiting holds is a different question entirely." Simone found Joon-seo on the office balcony that evening, the city spread out below them in its ordinary indifferent enormity, considerably calmer than the storm that had first cracked things open months earlier. Sarah asked if there was someone, he said without turning. "I told her the truth, that there might be, that nothing has happened yet." "How did she take it?" Simone asked. "Better than I expected," he said. "She said she hoped it was worth the waiting." He turned to face her. "I think about that most days now, whether it will be." "It will be," Simone said. "Not because waiting is easy, it isn't. But because whatever we build after this is going to be the first thing in either of our lives that started exactly the way we meant it to, clean, chosen, without anyone else's fathers or fortunes deciding the terms for us." He looked at her for a long moment, the specific stillness of a man who had spent 14 years inside an arrangement built by someone else, finally standing at the edge of something built, however slowly, entirely on his own terms. "Then we keep waiting," he said, "however long it takes." "However long it takes," Simone agreed. Ye-jin called him later that same week, her voice carrying the specific lightness of someone who had been waiting months to say something and had finally decided the waiting was over. "I heard about the filing," she said. "I also heard, from you directly this time, that you're actually waiting for the right reasons, instead of just avoiding the whole subject, the way you avoid everything uncomfortable." "I'm trying," Joon-seo said. "Simone's the one who actually proposed the waiting. I don't think I'd have had the discipline to suggest it myself." "That doesn't surprise me at all," Ye-jin said. "I told you months ago she was exactly who she appeared to be. I didn't realize part of that meant she'd be more disciplined about your own happiness than you've ever been. She has a way of being right about things I'd rather not examine too closely," Joon-seo said. "Good," Ye-jin said. You've spent your whole life surrounded by people who told you what you wanted to hear, starting with our father. I'm glad you finally found someone who tells you what you need to hear instead. That is where part 2 ends. Se-ra has filed. Her father's shipping lanes hang in the balance of a negotiation that has nothing to do with love and everything to do with legacy. And somewhere in a glass tower on Figueroa Street, two people have agreed to wait for something neither of them is willing to build on unfinished ground. The same tower where Joon-seo has now spent, without a single exception, 11 months and counting. Part 3 is coming. Subscribe, hit the bell, and tell me in the comments, do you think the waiting holds, or does something force their hand before the divorce is finalized? I read every single one. Don't go anywhere.